thank you to being the source of creation for everything. For this live webinar session that we're having today, we're about to embark upon this journey into the field of consciousness and healing. Thank you for energy healing and for all the technologies of consciousness which support the human ability to express divinity in the field of boundaries. The unbounded, quality-less being within the field of boundaries, that's amazing. Thank you to everyone's ancestors. And with that, a recognition of the relative level of expression. And thank you to all of us, the divine and everyone, for blessing our session today with the ability to work concisely and efficiently, to unfold new knowledge, and to promote healings for all of us and for the whole world that actually have a deeply beneficial effect for everyone, aligned with Dharma, aligned with pure truth, with being, expression of being. May everyone who's attending this webinar and everyone who may attend this webinar in the future increase their own capacity to work efficiently and gracefully and effortlessly with the energy healing process. I wish you all to become self-sufficient. Thank you. All right. Oh, and thank you to the eternal tradition of wisdom. We never want to leave them out. Okay. All right. Okay, so as usual, we do a brief, for all the new people, we do the brief recap of what is energy healing. Then we dive into today's little recap of yesterday's meeting and a description of today's topic. And then we, I think it's always nice to do a healing at that point. So it's actually kind of nice to start the sessions with a healing. But we'll start with a recap. Energy healing is using consciousness to heal the body. Ultimately, it's consciousness that causes the body to malfunction. Even in the case of accidents, that would be karma. So problems that crop up in the being are a result of something happening inside on the level of consciousness, and therefore we can logically conclude that if the body has, if consciousness has the ability to cause the physiology to go into a state of dysfunction, it can cause the body to go into a state of function. So we're using consciousness. And the nice thing about using consciousness is that you have it all the time for free. That is ever available. And what we're doing in these sessions is we're looking into the fine mechanics of how we harness the potential of consciousness with our attention, basically, to promote very specific effects. And we're looking at the fine mechanics of consciousness. We're looking at the landscape of consciousness. We're exploring some of the different ways in which, or tools of consciousness, which we can use to bring about specific changes and evolutionary life supporting for ourselves and for other changes. Okay, so that's energy healing in a nutshell. To review yesterday's session and just say, oh, I've got it written down today, yay. The title of today's session is Self-Discovery for Self-Healing. So the premise there is that the healing process and the evolutionary process is a process of continually redefining self, basically, upgrading. You know, we think of ourselves in a certain way, and then we go through a transformation, then we realize, oh, I'm actually more than I thought I was, or now I'm wiser than I was, or now I'm more capable than I was, like that. So each time there's like an upgrade. So the upgrade we can think of as a form of self-definition. That when an individual, when we are able to understand ourselves in the broadest possible terms, in the greatest possible terms, then we're able to utilize the full potential. So that's the premise behind this session. So yesterday, there was a great healing for refined perception. There was a nice healing. I've already gotten feedback from some people as a tool to eliminate fatigue, sleep and dream deprivation and fatigue from the system. So that was nice. I did a little recap of the nature of the causal body, which is that sort of finest level of expression of the physiology. And I think we did some healings in that area too. I'm using my memory banks. I'd say probably the most important thing was we set the foundation for today, looking into more like the mechanisms of consciousness that interface between the area of finest perception and the relative. Oh, another good thing that happened yesterday was some discussion about the 3 big energy centers of the body and tied that into a healing for refined perception. And we looked at refined perception from 3 different angles. It's coming back to me now. From the angle of actual perception, like actually seeing the energy structure of the world around us, for example, actually seeing. And then empathy, which is definitely a tool for refined perception. It's a way in which we understand our world energetically, certainly through the level of feeling, and particularly the way in which we understand what's happening with the causal level of the body. So empathy. So, okay, refined perception is the head area, right? Because that's where the senses of perception are. And then the empathy comes through the evolution and healing of the heart. And we ended yesterday with a healing for the whole world for the heart, which was very nice. And then intuition. And intuition, like a gut feeling, right? Intuition is actually administered through the neural network of the intestines and the gut and the connection between the spine and the gut area. There's a lot of neural tissue in that part of the body, and the kind of thinking that goes on there is an intuitive kind of thinking. So anyway, we did some work with that and some healings for that. Definitely everyone who's here today gets a copy of yesterday's session, and I recommend everyone to go back and check that out because it was a lot of fun. Okay. So today, before we totally launch, it would be good to just check in to our group, our healing circle, and see what kind of healing we can start out with, how we can launch today's session with a healing. And I love giving you the details. So all 3 of my perceptual centers open. I'm looking into the core of our group. And anytime you have a group, a business, a family, a state, a community of any kind, a country, a world, there's always a center. There's always an energetic center. And from the center, the silence of being can be located. So our group, our healing group, has a center. And so I'm with my energy centers, I'm putting attention on that energy center of our group. And I'm feeling it so settled today, so silent. Really, if anything, just the tenderest heart impulses going there in the center of the group. Yesterday, one of the points that came up about this central sort of, you could think of it like a collection station or something with all the value, all the gift of each of us going to that center and then creating a sort of harmonious balance of that, is that we create or produce through our collective consciousness a form of self which is greater than the sum of the parts. So for each of us, with a center for our healing circle, we have access to a template for health of the physiology, health of the field of consciousness, balance in the field of consciousness, wholeness, which is greater than anything any one of us could have produced on our own. And it's just so silent. Today it's so silent, it's so big. It's so big. It's so integrated. So I'm just feeling like just the pure presence of the mother of creation and all the causal body, that silence is radiating up to the causal level, that first layer of manifestation level. And it's created tremendous orderliness in the night. I see this through the levels of the review that all of us who were here yesterday also, and those of you who will be here yesterday in the future by watching the video. So all of us have sort of massaged up that form that was established at the beginning of yesterday's session. And there is a beautiful alignment. It looks like a kind of a mandala form that's stretching through the whole, from the center all the way out, sort of embracing everybody who's in our group, extremely orderly. And what's happened is the causal level of the physiology has upgraded. I'm seeing a lot more being quality in the causal body. Remember yesterday I talked about, we can think of the causal body like spaces or realms, we can think of it as vibrations, or we can think of it as being, forms of being, divine forms. And it's today, as I'm looking, I'm seeing that many divine forms are more established than they were before, which is wonderful, because those divine forms are ancient. They're like archetypal forms. They're the forms that have stood the test of time since before we had written language, for sure. And it's almost like a celebration in the causal level of the physiology. These forms, these ancient archetypal forms, which are very stable, they're the truest forms by which divinity expresses itself at the causal level. There's a lot of bliss right there. There's this feeling of the joy of being reestablished in this generation. And in past webinars, I've referred to some of them that were familiar, like Lord Narasimha, Lord Kalabhairava. Yesterday, I was reading a fabulous account from one of the ladies who's in the session of her experience with the goddess Kali Ma. It's amazing. It's an amazing form. So I've been thinking about that. Thank you for offering me your experience and the opportunity to look at that form of being. And that form of being, interestingly, comes into the area of the divine dialogue, that process, because this healing webinar is really all about transformation, right? It's just we build on what's already great. We take the established evolution and use that as a platform to build up to the next level, like that. And what we're looking at in the energy healing are the fine mechanics of that. As we explore those and understand those mechanics, we're able to utilize them to build ever finer and also greater constructs of consciousness which support highest health and well-being in the physiology and in the life. And alignment with divine intention, which is really important. So in the part of the process where the old breaks down, and we're still looking there, I think, for a lot of people, because that's I would say the most, for humans, that's the most challenging part of the process. And here's what I'm seeing, that naturally life is progressive. Naturally there are destructive and constructive laws of nature. So inevitably we have to deal with those. But what's really difficult as humans is sometimes in the midst of dealing with something which is challenging, then also malevolence can come in. And what I mean by that is that in our human world, there's also this factor that's sort of beyond the basic constructive and destructive laws of nature. It's beyond that. And it's a level of not niceness. I'm thinking of euphemisms for like pure evil, basically. But I mean, it's true. We live in, anybody, just all you have to do is look as far as the news, and you can see that there's all kinds of crazy stuff going on, and people who have let go of the idea of Dharma entirely and have decided maybe the better thing to do is just destroy everything utterly. And that happens. That happens. That's what happens when a kid goes into a school with a gun and that kind of thing. That's what happens when a terrorist straps a body bomb to his body and doesn't. I mean, that's what that is. And that's, I feel, that is where the value of Kali Ma comes in. Because, and let's define, this is different from the Kali of Kali Yuga that I was referring to earlier, because that Kali is a demon Kali who's responsible for the move of each yuga, of each time period, into a time of lesser alignment with natural law. The thing about Mother is she protects. And the other thing about Mother is she's really hypersensitive to the finest needs, the finest details of the child. So the thing about this form, this goddess form, is that she allows the breaking down or the destruction of what is not necessary, but in such a discriminating manner and with so much love, because being a mother, it's done, as we talked about yesterday, like with cold anger, like with the surgeon's scalpel, which saves lives, rather than just the bomb that destroys everything. Hot anger is the bomb, right? And cold anger is the surgeon's knife. And this is the difference between, we did a healing for that, by the way. It was quite nice. But this is the difference between using the destructive laws of nature for evolution versus using the destructive laws of nature for just total obliteration. Even in the total obliteration, somehow some piece of being remains, but the price that we pay doesn't seem to be worth it. And what we're looking for here, the whole reason that energy healing emerged, is because it became evident that there's a need for a means of working with the destructive laws of nature, and in a way that allows one maximum success in rebuilding health after those destructive laws of nature have done their thing. So that means caring. It means caring for the process on the way in, as well as caring for it on the way out. Yeah, and so my dear friend, beautiful man from Ogden, Utah, is saying that the main thing about Kali is destruction of ignorance. Yeah, beautiful. And I mean, basically, isn't all, here we are in our dialogue, basically all destruction is there for the sake of destruction of ignorance ultimately, but the way it happens, sometimes, like, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? So her ability to go in and like peel out those tiny threads of ignorance that are like at a subtle level, or they're hidden under the surface. And that kind of ties into that healing that we did yesterday for helping people who have forms in the causal field that are draining their energy. We have that. A lot of people have that. I've had that. I know what it feels like to have basic constructs of the personality, which actually are kind of self-sabotaging. So that happens when the form of being which can break down the ignorance with so much wisdom and compassion and so much care that no damage is done, when that aspect is misunderstood, misinterpreted, or misaligned. So that's where the healing is going. It's like finding that part of the self, finding that structure at the causal level of creation, and then honoring it in the way which is best suited to its nature to support the formation of or stabilization of that form in Dharma. And we talked yesterday about how the walls of karma are what cause those different forms in the causal body, but they can be replaced with Dharma. They can be enhanced by the form of Dharma to provide structures in the causal body that are absolutely aligning with highest evolution. I'm just looking at it. I'm seeing it, this form, when we started our healing, this beautiful mandala-like form that's radiant from the center of our circle. It has all the spines, you could say there's spines that come out from the center, are Dharma. They're the spines of Dharma. And we had to work with that a bit yesterday too, because I realized that the energy of Dharma is actually vastly powerful. It is intense and it can be overwhelming. And it's interesting that the flow of Kundalini is also associated with Kali, but it's also one of those things that if it comes up in a very kind of refined and gentle and controlled manner, it blesses, and if it's not, it can be quite uncomfortable. So just feeling into that form and allowing all those little structures that were like misrepresentations or misunderstandings or forms of that overarching element of being able to very, very discriminatingly remove those threads of ignorance. All of that's being now put back into place. And with that, the download for everyone of the skill set to employ cold anger, which is that very, very fine, it's like a review from yesterday, a little bit of that healing, but it's that very refined ability to see what is not complete, recognize what is required to complete the incompletion, and then provide that with such delicacy that one hardly knows. And this is for you. This is for you to do for yourself. This is actually something that is being given as part of the self-healing process. And it goes to work immediately on the part of the physiology known as the superconscious, which is the sense of self. Superconscious is basically the part of you responsible for loving you and protecting you and acknowledging you and recognizing you and understanding you. That part. That part. So much is happening. My words can't really keep up right now, but this is very important that some vicious cycles are being dissolved from the area near the more manifest area of the causal body up through the astral body. And yes, empowerment. Thank you, Angel. Thank you for being here. I love you. That's a comment. One of the online participants just wrote the word empowerment. Self-empowerment, right? Exactly. Okay, so it goes to work on that area of self. Now, what's interesting is there's a little structure in this area of self where I self-define. And what this structure does is when things start to become difficult or challenging, it's like a little habit or a pattern, and it looks to me, I'm following it back to its root. It looks to be ancestral. It also is, it's deeply like gripping. It's like enmeshed in the collective consciousness as well. So our collective consciousness right now, so many people have this thing sitting quietly, kind of camouflaged somewhere deep in their consciousness. And what it is when things start to go in a manner not expected or poorly, or I worked so hard and I got nothing for all my work, that kind of thing, then it causes this vicious cycle loop back on oneself of, well, there's something wrong with me. I'm not good enough. And then the I'm not good enough is like, oh, well, that's me failing again. So then it loops back on me again. Well, that's because I'm also not good enough for not being good enough. And then, you know what I'm saying? It's like loop, 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 loop. And so that structure, we've found it. We're uncovering it. It has a kind of a rick-like spiral in it. So that structure is being addressed by this established form of, I use the word kalima to describe it from the healing circle, from our healing circle. It's very, within the healing circle, within our collective, it's got this tremendous balance. It's complete. It's integrated. It's established. So that can go into this form, which is actually in the collective of humanity. And it can undo, it can untwist that little thing, because it's that little thing that causes people to spiral out of control. You know, it's really, I would say, in many cases, responsible for mental health issues, for example, and, you know, many of the other problems that crop up. Teenagers, you know, give it to the teenagers. We just don't want them shooting each other anymore. That kind of thing. So I'm finding it. I'm finding it. Now, this brings us to some new information that I wanted to explore with you, because I've been exploring it on my own for a couple of weeks since before I made this title. I mean, since after I made this title for our meeting today. And it's very interesting. I think there's like a huge potential in it. So this little form that's being dissolved, we can say it's being dissolved out of the collective consciousness. And I'm checking and I'm checking and I'm checking, and I'm seeing millions, and I'm seeing hundreds of millions of people, hundreds of millions. Billions? Looks like a billion. A billion people are getting this healing. Our healing circle is the little seed offering that little healing in there to undo that little twisty thing. Beautiful, you guys. And the waves of gratitude, I don't know if you can feel them. They start rippling back into our healing circle. We just offer them to being, offer them to being, offer them to being. Because if you try to fill them all, it's like, whew, overwhelming amount of gratitude, can't take it. So that, I want to talk about that little form, how we found it, how we uncovered and dissolved it, because there's something more interesting to be learned here from this process. And what we're doing is we're really, all that gratitude and all that love that comes out of the healing folds into the form state of being, and then comes back as knowledge, which fits pretty nicely with the fact that what Kali Ma does is destroy ignorance, right? So, okay, we've spent lots of time looking at the causal field, right? And we know that in each of us, there are multiple areas, structures, forms, regions in the causal body, and each one is vibrating in its own way. And those vibrations work together synergistically to produce the scaffolding, which allows the physical material reality to emerge. So we need to look at the scaffolding, because that little loopy thing that we just cleared, that was a kind of a little scaffolding piece that was giving rise to effects in our collective consciousness of very malevolent behavior on the parts of people when allowed to get to the surface, when allowed with its support system. It makes a big nasty mess. So, and I'm still checking into that, and I'm also seeing Dharma moving into that area. That healing is actually still continuing to a certain degree, because it's rippling, right? It's rippling and having secondary ripples and stuff. So Dharma is also playing in there. Okay. So I wanted to show you a picture. I'm going to change my backdrop here real quick so you can see this, because I wanted to talk about these forms. I'm going to pop up here. This, we've seen this. This is something I've showed you guys before. This is a drawing by my friend Harry Alto, and thank you, Harry. Harry said I could use his drawing anytime, so with all gratitude to him for having the vision, having his vision and his artistic abilities. And I'm standing right in the center of the picture, so I'm going to step off to the side here for a second and show you. This is a picture of the human form. Here, you are here. This is a map. You are here. And it's frozen. Oh, yeah. Phooey. Oh, now it's moving. Okay, good. Okay. So thank you. We're thinking that could have something to do with our internet. So, because it's not freezing on my end, and Tom says it's not freezing upstairs either. So hopefully for all you viewers out there and other places, it's not freezing for you either. Should I do it this way? Let me do it this way. Then I can see everybody in the room too. Okay, so this is a map, and you are here. There's a little guy, see? Okay, so so this circle It is. It's a little stick figure guy. So this circle around him, this is his astral body here. And the astral body can change shape. It can get bigger and smaller. So Harry drew it this big in this particular picture. And now these circles here, these are all the subtle layers of the body all drawn up on top of each other. These circles represent the layers of the causal body. So the causal body has all these layers. And by the way, for anybody who hasn't seen this, we'll attach this picture to the follow-up email. So when you get the recordings, you get the picture too. You can keep it and take a closer look at it at home, right? Put it under the magnifier and take a look. What we want to look at here are these forms. They're these very interesting forms. I wonder if I can make my, no, it doesn't let me do that. Too bad. There's some forms in this picture. Oh, here's one. Okay, you can't see me, but you can barely see the form. There's a little form here that looks like a sort of a mandala-like structure, and then there's one over here too. Sorry, the picture doesn't, the pictures, you only get, oh, here's a good one right there. There's this one right here. This is what I wanted to look at. There are these forms at the denser level of the causal body, right where the causal body meets the astral body. And I know I said the astral body's little in this picture, but remember, Harry was trying to represent many, many different layers of experience all on top of each other in a single picture, right? So at the junction between, because, okay, we can look also at all these lines that are in this complicated picture as the web of life as well. And so these are forms at the astral level of the web of life and at the very sort of finest level of the astral body. Okay, we'll stop for a little bit. That's a very complicated picture, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, we'll go back to our other picture. Okay, simpler. Then we can think. Am I frozen again? No, okay, good. Okay, so the causal body is the finest level of feeling, but it starts to rise up into forms. It starts. And right where it starts to rise up into forms, there are these amazing sacred geometrical shapes. When I've looked at them a lot, and I've taken walk and talks with my mathematics son, and so we've looked at them from the angle of mathematics as well, because there's something very extremely logical about them and extremely orderly about them. And the way mathematics describes reality in a very kind of orderly, simple, it's like mathematics is the language of all the hard sciences, basically. It's the language of physics, and it's the language of engineering, and it's the language of architecture and so forth. Well, it's also kind of the language of the architecture of our physical material world as well. And so there's this fascinating spot between the causal and astral level where these forms start to appear or emerge. And we're just taking a look at them together. And as we're looking, I want to add one more little thing. I'm going to bring up, oops, I shouldn't do that. Can you see that? Oh, good. You guys aren't seeing my inbox. So the Yoga Vasishta has 4 chapters that are devoted to yogic flying, which is something that's practiced here in Fairfield. So it's like, for those of you who aren't familiar, it's something that's it's a common practice here in Fairfield. And there's this point that's in that Yoga Vasishta where he discusses, for one verse, he discusses what's required to make the body lift off the ground. And that would be with, there'd be some Kundalini element there too, even though he probably doesn't mention. And then the second verse talks about what is required to keep the body in the air. What's required to keep the body in the air. And in the previous verse, he talks about the body is like a tube. And you can actually, if you go back to the Harry Alto picture, you can see that the inside of the astral body is like a tube. So it's like an energy tube or cord. I refer to it as the cord of light sometimes, or the sacred cord running through the body that's hollow inside. And the hollowness is space. But then he says within that space, so within that point where the astral body starts to interface with the unmanifest level of creation, something is perceived that's translated as the word mist. And to the degree that the writing in the mist becomes clear, the body is able to stay in the air. So that's the point. And so when that, a dear friend of mine, whose name I will not mention, sent me that insight, because they had a closer connect into the analysis of the Yoga Vasishta, I went, that's it. That's that area between the causal and the astral level. It's the astral level appears like these threads, like in Harry Alto's picture with all those threads everywhere. He's kind of drawing it from a sort of astral perspective. The web of life is all these threads of creation. But when it gets almost to the causal level, the threads become very, very, very delicate and very, very fine, and it creates something that looks more like a mist. But when I had been looking at this and discovering it, and then all of a sudden my friend sent me the email with the point from the Yoga Vasishta. I'm like, oh wow, synchronicity, right? It all started to tie together. And I thought to myself, in the mist, there are these orderly structures. Now, in the quote from the Yoga Vasishta, it says the writing in the mist. But when I looked at it, it looked like a little bit more like mathematical forms, but there was a sort of a beautiful integrated logic by which these specified forms work together to create an unshakably stable structure, basically, unshakably stable. So that's what I was looking at. And I was thinking, I'm just getting a download. Thank you. Because of you guys, I knew if we talked about this, that more information would come. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, everybody. They're like recipes. All the archives of all the recipes, all the formulas for all the light medicines, there. So that's being received by everyone's God presence into the healing circle and for everyone. All the formulas. So I'm just reading. This is very simple, very innocent. I'm just kind of at this point throwing out what I'm reading. And one of the things I'm reading here are the last time that people have really been harnessing or utilizing this area and like really, I don't want to say exploiting, because I feel that the process should be done with a lot more respect than that. So it's not so much about exploiting, but utilizing or understanding, like really appreciating it, and honoring it. It is thousands of years ago. In any kind of a cultural way, in any kind of a large way. Getting readings from the ancient stone builders on Earth. Those individuals responsible for all those megalithic structures that are still with us. Seeing that the intelligences that reside on Earth in less physical forms, such as Earth Devas and so, they are right in there using that all the time. That's their area, So they're completely comfortable and completely working with that. Good, well, through our healing circle, we already have a nice copacetic relationship with Earth's intelligence. So that should make things easier, simple. And what I'm feeling is from our healing circle, there's a wave, the heart is producing a wave of sort of gratitude and appreciation and understanding that's going to all those collectives that are on Earth presently in the form of Earth's intelligence and also in the past, our ancestors, basically. To whatever degree we're still holding any of that life energy in us. A tradition. And there's also appears to be Oh, beautiful. Oh, beautiful. One of the ladies on the panel is saying mega expansion, multiples of vastness, cosmic. Yeah. Thank you. I'm reading out your chat comments, guys, because so the people in, do you guys see the chats over there? Do you see the chats coming? No, so I have to read to everybody. Thanks. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, so it's opening up. So we have a protocol. We have a protocol because we have humans on Earth in human physiologies who have already worked with this energy. They've already been familiar and honoring and acknowledging and recognizing the mechanics of how consciousness functions at that level. As I was working with it over the last couple of weeks, I was thinking, this is really where the rubber meets the road between consciousness as very much unmanifest. I mean, I can't say that because at the causal level, there's this finest manifest, but it's like, this is where it really, the manifesting really starts. This is where the structuring, I guess you could say, the structuring of this physical material realm really starts there at that level, right between, my fingers, right between the causal and astral levels. That's where we really have the mechanistic structures that you could say, because in the causal level of creation, those laws of nature, those beings of creation, if we want to talk about them that way, they're in every part of the universe, and they're structuring worlds that are very different from our world, right? But it's at that point between the causal and the astral where we start working with structures that are more or less responsible for this world, for these types of bodies, and for this nature that we have here. So I'm going and reading some more. Thank you, guys. It's like we all get to see it through all of our eyes together at the same time, and it creates a big, clear, beautiful vision. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. Thank you. So we couldn't have done this today without the healing we did yesterday for Dharma. This is absolutely essential. This area of consciousness is not accessible. It's not accessible to everyone. That explains to me why there have been for like so many ages, like things like the mystery school and secret societies and we don't know what. I think it's that. It's that I can see that the understanding and the unfoldment of the details of how this area of consciousness works are protected by some kind of a sheath of Dharma. And that when the Dharma is established, then it has to be established to a certain degree in the physiology in order to support anyone's ability to get into that area and to work with it directly. Well, that's beautiful. Okay, we're on board. All of you guys are on board. We're all on board. We already did this. So that was a check. We just went through a checkpoint, basically. I'm looking. So I'm seeing the mist, and I'm looking to read the words in the mist. And also, you should know that these words, I say I look, and then I start coming out with stuff, right? So the words, this is where the verses of the Ved emerge as verses of the Ved. I mean, we know they actually emerge directly from being, obviously, but they have to go through a bit of a process before they come out the mouth, obviously. So it's like, this is where, in the mist, that's where I'm seeing the strings of syllables and the strings of words, the suktas and the verses, the mandalas. I'm seeing the mandalas as loops within loops within loops within loops. That ties us back to the healing, right? Because in the healing, we'd found this little thing that was not helpful to people, and it was looping and looping and looping. So there's like a law of nature in that area of consciousness, which promotes a sort of infinite looping type of effect, infinite cycles or infinite loops. Okay, well, that's useful. That's interesting to know. That means that the quality of reflection is also very lively at that spot. And that's an old premise I think I had been looking at in the distant past, and now it's coming up like with more detail, that consciousness has this ability to reflect. And of course, that's how we use our refined perception, right? That like, if I'm perceiving with my heart, what happens is awareness travels out to whatever the object of awareness is. And then whatever is happening with that object, it reflects back like a mirror on this heart or on this physiology. If I'm doing like an energy read on somebody's body, it's not my body, but it's like the awareness goes out into their body and it takes a read which reflects, and I feel the whatever they're feeling in their body. Like if there's, say, pain in the liver, for example, it's not that I feel pain in my liver, but I feel like the reflection of pain. I feel like a little overlay or a little impulse there. So I'm just looking at this element because the element of the loops coming out opened up. So we're looking at that and how that happens. So we're using what we know, we're building, right? We're building a structure here, a verbal structure to understand, because that's how the purpose of language is, to create a kind of order out of chaos. And right now, the mist is a chaos. So that's why we're going in to discriminate in what's going on. I'm looking again. Oh, I love this, you guys. Thank you. Thank you for your beautiful silence that allows the exploration to happen and for the privilege of being the mouth. Thank you for that. Okay, here's what I'm seeing. In the whole astral field, the whole web of life is all these threads, and everywhere all these threads. But for us, because this is like new territory, this area of the mist, we'll call it the area of the mist, it's not stable yet. And it's like, I feel that the area that's been revealed so far is quite limited compared to the potential area, because the potential is infinite. The potential is for the entire infinity and vastness, as was mentioned, the vastness of the universe to be revealed, the mist area of it to be fully revealed, totally 100%, with all clarity and no questions and no doubts and full understanding. That's the potential. So with our beautiful, immense, profound silence, I offer the vision of that potential back to being. I'm just seeing it, seeing the mist, and the area that's the light. Okay, the light of being or awareness. Oh, here comes a download. Thank you. So, okay, you've heard me talk about the sacred inner sanctum of the self, right? And that's this deep, deep inner area at the sort of the core of one's own relationship with oneself, in the Brahmastan, or the deepest center of that, being like a kind of a star chakra. Like there's this deep center, feel this radiance of pure light of being. Oh, more of the downloads coming, more of the download. Okay, so we all have access to the field of absolute silence of being. And from that, the first manifestations are just pure awareness, pure perception, pure light of being. And oh dear, is there any way to unplug that? Thank you. Anyway, thank you. Anyway, it's okay. This is so delicate, but that's always, it's not a, that's nature, right? Validating, it's like, oh, ring, something just, the full download came in. Okay. So here's the thing. There's a quality of consciousness, which is extreme innocence, like a stem cell. It reminds me of a stem cell. It reminds me of a stem cell in that it's so fine. It's it's like a light medicine. And we've worked with all kinds of light medicines that do this, that, and the other, all kinds of formulas of all kinds of things. But this one is the one before all the others. This is the one that's so pure, that's so soft, that's so absolutely just light itself, basically. And yet with all that potential in it, that it can morph into anything. And that energy, that light is shining into the mist. That light is shining into the mist. And that particular quality of consciousness, of being pure potential, which is not yet manifest, is the quality of Saguna Brahm, right? So that's direct from the Paraprakriti, or unmanifest level of creation, shining. So what's happening is there's like a loop of consciousness that's being made from the level of warmed up being, and it's looping up into the junction between the causal and astral level of the physiology. And as it loops up there, it's lighting it up. It's lighting up that whole area of the field. And it's so interesting, as it lights up, I'm seeing all this stuff that's been hidden. Oh, it feels a little bit like opening Pandora's box, just a little bit. But because this is an area of everyone's being or consciousness where sometimes stuff that we want to hide from ourselves, stuff that's hiding, can hide there. So yesterday, when we were doing the healing for increased energy and kind of eliminating any areas that act like leaks, energy leaks in the body, right? We did that healing. This is like seeing that there's another level where things like energy leaks or the source of problems can reside and can go unnoticed, is in this particular area, structuring area. The mist is the structuring area of the consciousness. So as the light is starting to shine in, it's lighting up everything. It's lighting up all the good stuff and all the not so good stuff. Everything is lighting up. Do you remember the walls that people build around their hearts? We talked about those yesterday and did a healing for them. At the end of yesterday's session, I was thinking about how that was such an important healing, and how it might be master in the heart. Oh, beautiful. So one of our panelists is saying, she puts up the words master in the heart, but that's also where we find that the guru, you know, the inner guru, the inner wisdom is right there at that level. I would say the bridge, the master is the bridge between the relative field of creation and the absolute, so we can pick it up all the way through. So as the mist is lighting up and we're seeing all the different values that are there, kind of a whole mix of different values, they can be seen as the sounds and their gaps, because there's a collapse and an emergence between each sound and each next syllable. It's beautiful. It's full of light. I'm seeing it. I'd like to offer the vision of the whole thing to being. Just offer it back to the source of creation, because I don't know what to do with it. To be honest, what do we do now? What do we do now, Master of the Heart? again, Dharma's coming in. And particularly the value of compassion is carrying with it incredible increased capacity to love. This is causing a transformation for the heart. Transformation for the heart. And this transformation is an extension of yesterday's healing that went to 1 billion people. So this healing for the heart that occurred yesterday, that helped people unblock the walls that had been built up as a result of abandonment and trauma and terrible circumstances, all those who have been the recipients, victims, thank you, victims of cruelty, of evil, all those. So this is, again, a big healing for the heart, evidently necessary for our increased ability to work in this area, means increased of our refined perception, and particularly starting, and it's no surprise that that's what the physiologies would do, is they would, start by, I just hit my microphone, they'd start by increasing the refined perception at the empathy level in the heart, because that's the sort of the central guide for all the transformations for the whole body. I want to say that I've been following a recommendation of one of our attendees, a great teacher, that it's good to save the questions for last, because I get rolling, and sometimes I agree, even for myself sometimes, or when something happens like the phone just rang, it's a little bit pulls me off my roll, right? It pulls me off my trajectory. So I've been, no, it's fine. I mean, I should have thought of unplugging the phone. It's like there's just a lot of details. I got these lights and all different microphones and stuff. So there's always a lot of things to attend to put the webinar together. However, I appreciate everyone saving the questions for the last. We're just a few minutes from the end of the session, and I want to be sure to get to everyone's questions. So, and I've got one that came in on the email, and then I've got about 5 up here. Oh, beautiful. So this lady's just saying that she loves the energy center of the group. I do too. It's like we've created something very, very beautiful that's a tremendous resource for all of it. And everybody should know that it's accessible to all of you always. We always have that center accessible. So enjoy that as a resource. The next thing she said last night, healing on the empathy on the global level for the heart was so very helpful. Entire heart area relaxed, and she slept so well. So God bless. There were other people who emailed in the same thing. So I'm really happy to hear that. Yeah, it's my intention that this work should be useful to all of us and continue to be useful as time goes on. Anytime we revisit, anytime you rewatch the videos or anything, it just continues being useful. Here's another one from Croatia. Yay, Croatia. My experience is that sometimes when I feel more in balance, comes just one thought and invites me to follow her and look nice. Like I might stay more awake in the evening, and if I follow her, I begin to get more out of balance. Oh, right. So I understand what you're asking. So in other words, every time you feel like you start to make progress, then something will come up, and often it will be kind of disguised as like, oh yes, this is for your progress and this is good for you. And then if you follow that thing, it ends up taking you off your track. And we did talk about that a little bit yesterday, about some of the forms in the causal body, which have been sitting for so long and often are inherited from a long period of time in the past, like ancestors. And so we inherit a lot of our like subtle structures of our consciousness from our ancestors. But the point is that what you're saying is you feel like you make progress and then you slide a little bit back, like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And I know it seems to be an inefficient way to move forward. And yet if that's happening, I feel, because it happens to me too sometimes, I always do my utmost to like get to bed at a good time and take good care of my body and stuff. But sometimes it happens. And we have to trust. I think there's an element of trust, especially when you're a mom, of knowing that it happens because integration is required, some integration. That somehow you took a step forward, but now that step wants to stabilize in. So then you eat something that takes a little longer to digest than the usual or something, whatever, something like that. The important thing was the healing we did today, to not be hard on yourself. I've a comment here, an addition, thank you very much, from Ogden, Utah. Is that when that happens, it's a balancing of the sanskaras. And sanskaras are impressions. They're like impressions from the past. And so sometimes when at the surface it seems, thank you, at the surface it seems like I'm not doing what I should have done or what I expected of myself or my ideal, that's because I'm actually doing some work deeper inside. And once that deeper inside work is done, the next time I come back to balance, the balance will be stronger and better and more stable. And even if I do slide back, I'm going to slide back from a higher level, right? First I'm here and I slid back a bit, but then if I'm here and I slide back the same amount, I'm still better off than I was down there, right? So thank you for the question, dear. And also sanskaras, thank you for the comment as well, because it occurs to me that karma sits in the causal body, but sanskaras are inclined to sit more at that misty area. So what I'm doing is I'm just offering the idea to being that if there are sanskaras in the mist, like impressions are kind of like vague memories, right? Like in the mist, that any sanskaras in the mist, ooh, I'm just feeling them. Ooh, okay, this is a big validation from natural law. This is a big yes. Yes, other people are feeling them too. Some of these date back to the beginning of creation, says Ogden. Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, they have a very, as soon as I started looking for sanskaras in the mist, it's like, oh, this totally rich field of experience just bubbled right up to the surface. So the sanskaras, again, this is where, again, we couldn't do this part of the work if we hadn't activated that Kali Ma aspect of self, because we have to go in the mist. My goodness, you don't want to go in and make a mess of something that's really important and needs to be there, right? It has to be the surgeon's scalpel. It has to be to apply to those particular sanskaras which are responsible for inefficiency, unnecessary suffering, which are responsible for self-sabotage. I'm reading off the sanskaras right now. These are the ones that I'm seeing that are things that are coming out, that are being removed with the scalpel, with the loving mother who cares so much and is so sensitive to every detail. Illusion. There seems to be a relationship between sanskaras and illusion, because those impressions, they can get like, they can sort of twist a little bit over time, right? Some of the sanskaras go, Leela, oh, thank you. Yes, Leela is another one from Ogden. It's like a play, the play of the creation, the Maya of creation. That the sanskaras get in there as impressions, and then they start to resonate off of each other. They start to play off of each other. And as they do that, they give rise to other forms which are also not necessarily useful. We're just going after the ones that are not aligned with Dharma, basically. And we're letting Dharma be our guide at every point. And Dharma, that means Dharma established in the center of the healing circle and connected to being. And so Dharma guides the scalpel. into the mist to take out the specific sanskaras which are non-useful for evolution. It's a big cleansing. It's a big rain, the rain of Dharma in the mist. It's a misty rain. With such tenderness, I'm seeing this happening with such tenderness that absolutely it's amazing that some of the most important, valuable, vital aspects of self are sitting right in some cases, they're almost like the last question. She says, sometimes this thought comes up that seems like so good. Why? Because it was knitted together with this other bit that wasn't useful. And so it's like the scalpel has to go in and undo it through the knitted fabric of this misty, the mist of the consciousness between causal and astral. That's why energy moved from the heart down into the solar plexus, says one of our panelists. Beautiful. Thanks for sharing your experience as we go along, because everybody's experience is really important, and I feel it enhances, it kind of adds perspective on everybody else's experience. You guys are the best. Anyway, it's uncovering a quality of tenderness which is extreme. Like I would say more, I'm seeing tenderness in detail more than I've ever really fully appreciated in the past. And that quality of tenderness is, we've got another comment here. I just want to hold that comment. There we go. So I finished the sentence. That tenderness is related to the stem cell energy that we were working with earlier. It's that first primordial energy that comes up, and it hasn't turned into a specific light medicine yet. It's just pure potential. And that tenderness is being offered back into being, and it's like marrying with that stem cell energy. So it's adding value, it's adding oomph. Would the word mojo be appropriate? It's adding like, it's adding like power, it's adding shakti, it's adding intensity to the stem cell energy, enhancing it, giving it a quality that will allow us as our collective, because we're kind of coming up to our hour here too, I've got more questions to go, but allowing us to get into that misty area and work with it more. You can bet we'll be working with this in upcoming webinars, because there's still so much that's yet to unfold from it. The potential is still there. So here's another comment about the sanskaras dissolving. A bit of time machine going back to the inception point and undoing from there. So sweet. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, some of the sanskaras coming back from the beginnings of time. And so our group is big, right? And we have all these different pieces that can input and can add to and enhance the value of the healing. I just want to hold this. I just want to offer the whole thing to silence a little bit more, because a lot's happening. And in the next 6 minutes, I can't say it all. So I think we're just going to what we want to do is honor it. And so I'm just going to honor it with silence for a moment. Beautiful, beautiful. Just feeling the energy moving in like a gray tide, the tide coming in. And as it comes in, it rolls, and it rolls out to infinity in those infinity loops. And when it hits infinity, the resolution. So beautiful that. Okay, here's another question. This one's from Scotland. The goddess of Scotland has spoken. Hello, I'm with thinking of the reflection of how someone is feeling, and I gave the example of my liver. How does one interpret the reflection or the feeling? Say one doesn't know how something feels as one hasn't experienced it in this lifetime. That's a very good question. And, you know, in this healing session, we've been exploring the mist, right? Between the causal and astral level of the physiology that, that we haven't experienced directly or haven't made sense of in this lifetime. And so how do we do that? What we have to do is break it down like you're unpacking a suitcase full of karma or something. You know, when something is new, it's necessary to go in. If the feeling is there, and it's like when I first felt the sanskaras, I got this big download of the energy structure of the sanskaras, and then right away I had to jump in and start analyzing them and breaking them apart. And well, there's a piece that feels like this, and there's a piece that feels like that, and there's a little thread that goes back to the beginning of creation, and so yes.
Is that like through the heart feeling or more through the top?
Oh, that's a good point. I find that I use all three when I'm unpacking a really big package, but almost always, guys, and maybe this is just me, but I almost always start at the heart, because the heart is such an administrative center for all the other areas that we use to perceive at subtle levels of creation, right? The heart is like basic administrator, whole body. Yeah. Point here on this one. I want to do everybody. I want to get to everybody. Although symptoms have lessened, fear of symptoms had remained strong, beginning to dissolve now during this webinar. Yay. Blessings to all. Beautiful. So symptoms are scary, and then there's the fear of the symptoms, and then the fear is scary. And so that's so beautiful that that's finally washing out. Ogden says he thinks we're talking about the Akashic record, and I think he's absolutely right. The Akashic record looks like a great system of threads that are just like a mass rope, like a massive rope that starts at the beginning of the Big Bang, the beginning of creation, and it just unfurls. It just rolls and 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 rolls, and it like diversifies. It starts like one, and then it becomes multiple and multiple, multiple. And at some point in the history of the universe, it's like so many. It's like, am I going to explode, or am I going to become completely overwhelmed? And then it comes back again at the end. So yes, question.
Mist, is that beyond time?
Yes, that is still beyond. Yes, it is still beyond time. We're still beyond time in the mist. Thanks. Good question. It sounds like it's related to shadow work, says a lady. Yeah, that's, wow. Now, I haven't really done a lot of shadow work. She was thinking that earlier in the session too. Love you so much. So, yes. Now, my understanding with shadow work, and this is only, gosh, from an outsider's point of view, because I'm not really an expert, but that's where a person kind of goes in and explores sort of darker elements of their own nature in order to no longer be suppressed by them or held down by them. But yeah, like using the scalpel. Using the scalpel is like shadow work, I would say. In my limited degree, yes, because what we're doing at that point is we're not denying that the anger is there, because everybody feels what they feel. And being in denial and not being honest with yourself is way worse than even exploding, right? So really, it's worse to be dishonest with yourself, or to pretend something's not what it is. So shadow work is about going in and saying, okay, I'm going to be honest with who and what I really am, and look at my shadow side, look at my darkest bits, look at my worst parts or whatever, and kind of get a hold of that, get a handle on that. So I would say, yeah, definitely. Love you so much. All right, here's a question from Holland. She says, life has been stagnant for 10 years, and she feels stuck. And stuck in time. Projects don't take off, not meeting the right people, eagerly reaching for solutions, and in her dreams and everywhere, but never quite getting there. So frustrating. A lot of lack in life: finances, career, satisfaction, friendships, romance. Looking back, objectively, she wonders what's deeper going on. Forces that hinder progress. Tried lots of different things on the surface, like dating sites and applying for jobs and projects not working. Nothing makes a difference. Always ending up at square one. Hardcore pattern. Question, am I constructing my own blocks? Time for a game changer. Okay. So this is the game changer. Energy healing is a great game changer. And centuries upon centuries of human beings have discovered, at least since agriculture, at least, probably before that if I do some hard work now, then I will reap some benefit in the future. So it's kind of like an investment in one's own future. And what we've done is we have leveraged that principle, and we've done a lot to make the quality of our life now much nicer than it was, say, 1,000 years ago. We've worked on this premise that if I work hard in the moment, if I sacrifice or work hard in the moment, if I invest in my future, that somehow down the road, things will be easier. And what we're doing in energy healing is we're looking at that principle, but looking at it from a deeper level, which is, if I do things on the surface right now, I get a certain amount of effect, but sometimes I do things and it doesn't make a difference. So what is the difference between my friend over here who went on the dating site and found the person that they married, and Mia went on the dating site and didn't find anybody to get married to, or whatever? The difference has to do with how the action on the surface, how much it's infused with the divine level of self, the essential self deep inside. So it's possible that eagerness alone isn't the whole answer, because obviously anybody who goes to amount of trouble to accomplish something is dedicated to that. So dedication alone isn't enough. Dedication alone isn't enough. There's something more that's required. And that something more is the connection to infinite being. Because the infinity of being, when that infuses into the relative, it brings like the support of the whole rest of the universe with it. The whole rest of the universe comes along to support that process. So there was a healing we did yesterday, which I think is very valuable here. And that's where the silence of being was opened up or inserted in the gap between the limbic response in the brain and the whole prefrontal cortex response in the brain to any difficult situation. And this was in order to promote the ability to use anger like a surgeon's scalpel rather than using it like a destructive bomb. So that healing, and of course this is somebody in Europe, so you might not have been with me last night, but you'll receive the recording so you can go back and look at that healing, because that healing will directly address this question. Okay. Thank you. We'll do some more. At the next webinar, we've got lots of yummy, open-ended tidbits to carry us on to the next healing that we do. So thank you everyone so much for being here and for everything. And I look forward to sharing the next upcoming webinars with everyone. Loving you dearly.